Welcome up, everyone. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we are bringing you stories of people who make a difference in the lives of others. Rotary International is all about service above self. There are 1.4 million Rotarians and Rotaractors and 36,000 plus clubs, all strewn across the planet, making things better for others in their communities near and far. We see this as an effort that happens locally, globally, and digitally. As the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, it is our focus on finding ways to share stories that you might not be able to hear otherwise. And some of those stories are very specifically powerful about specific things. In our case, we have this year a special focus on healthcare issues. And healthcare issues are there both from the standpoint of the good that we do to make a difference through projects, but also for taking care of ourselves so that we're in the best position we can be to make a difference in the lives of others. When we think about the things that we're proud of in Rotary, there are a number of pieces to that. One of those pieces has to do with the dedication that we have to helping make great projects happen. And one of the best ways that happens is through the Rotary Foundation. And one of the things that we're proud of is the number of people in our club who have achieved Paul Harris fellowships. And with regard to that, I would like to pass the first moment of this recording along to President Angelica.
Thank you so much, Rushton. So yeah, I want to take this great opportunity to make an announcement. So I'm very pleased to congratulate Phil for receiving a Paul Harris Fellow. So Phil, thank you so much for your generosity. This is your certificate, and we are very proud and very thankful for having a member like you. So on behalf of the board and the entire club, I want to thank you for your generosity. And we are very grateful for your contribution. Thank you so much. And now I will hand it over to Rushton, and then Phil, if you want to say something.
Well, thank you. I support the foundation as much as I can.
Well, thank you, Phil. Thank you. The generosity that you show and the service to the club is something that we all treasure. One of the things about coming to our club to catch these programs is that you're seeing the different things that we do over the course of our meetings, the inspirational video, the happy dollars, the different pieces, and then you get to the program and you read the bio, and the bio today, I mean, is kind of a really interesting one for a lot of reasons, but you've already read it. So I will simply say that we have with us Dr. Rich Godfrey, who is not only a doctor and a traveler, and as I know through my own contact with him, a really fun guy. He's a guy with a story to tell about possibilities that we should all consider for where Rotary's focus may lie next. Rich, it is a pleasure to have you with us, and I would love to hand the mic over to you. Welcome.
Rushton, thank you so much. It's an honor to be able to present to your club, and I'm going to try to run through a lot of information that I'm very excited, and I hope you'll find it of great interest and participate in the years ahead. So I'm going to start right off and tell you that this is about HPV and cervical cancer and what Rotary may be able to do in the upcoming years. So I'm going to try to get my slides to move along. And why are they not moving for me? There we go. So we all know Paul Harris and are familiar with how he speaks favorably towards doing action-related projects. And that's what this is all about. And all of us are familiar with Polio Plus, the incredible things that Rotary International and each of us as Rotarians has contributed to. You know, if you think back, when we first identified the polio virus was 1909, and then it was another, 41 years before we got a vaccine. And then think about COVID, and we had a vaccine in 2 months. So things happen fast today with technology. I won't go into the details other than to just point out that In 2022, the last statistics I looked at, we only had, somewhere around 68 cases on the whole planet. So we've done an incredibly great job. Hats off to all Rotarians for this. But let's look at what else we might think about in the coming future. So I want to point out cervical cancer is the second most common cause of death from cancer worldwide for women. Pretty big numbers. Close to 350,000 women die every single year from cervical cancer. And it's an agonizing, horrible cancer from which to die. And most of these women are taking care of families. They're at the center. Maybe their ages are between 40 and 50. It's a tragic death. And I really want to share this. It's preventable. So let's just think about this on a larger scale. The worldwide mortality of polio is, somewhere, and now we're talking about deaths, probably only around 30 per year, thanks to Polio Plus. Well, look at the mortality from cervical cancer. It's literally 1,000 times as great. 350,000 women dying of cervical cancer every single year. So if you multiply that out over 10 years, we'd be looking at 3 million women that might die of cervical cancer. It's a huge number. How does it start? What's it about? Some of you may be familiar, but just briefly, almost all cervical cancer right now is started by the HPV virus. It can basically, mostly sexually transmitted, stay with the individual for somewhere around 10 to 20 years before it becomes precancer. Once it becomes precancer, the immune system can usually control the HPV virus, but if it doesn't, it becomes precancer and eventually cancer. So here's just a brief summary of what it would look like over a 60-year time period. And you can see that many women do get the HPV infection, but they don't go on to get cancer. Their immune systems work. However, the unfortunate ones that get precancer, a significant number will go on to get cancer. So we need primary prevention, secondary prevention, and tertiary prevention. And just to give you an idea, where do we see this? It's mostly in the lower and middle income countries, huge amounts in India, huge amounts in Africa, a lot in Central America, and I'm going to speak to that. But I want to familiarize you with the WHO call for an elimination of cervical cancer. This is basically targeting it's called the 90-70-90. 90% of girls will hopefully be vaccinated by 15 years of age by 2030. 70% of women will be screened. 90% of women that are identified with cervical cancer will be treated. That's the goal. I work with an organization called PINC, Prevention International of Cervical Cancer. We teach screening, and it's basically train the trainers. We go in, we show hospital personnel how to do the screening, and then we get out of the way and let them take care of it. And we use VIA. What is that? VIA refers to visual inspection with acetic acid. All you need basically is vinegar solution, a headlamp, and a speculum. And when you stain the cervix, you can identify the early changes, the precancer stage, and then we're able to treat. So that's VIA. And it's very simple and easy to learn. We can teach almost any healthcare provider how to do it. And the results are they're basically, you can screen and treat the same day. So we want to integrate this throughout lower income countries. How do we do it? How do we treat cervical cancer? This is some of our technology. What you're looking at is a thermocoagulator. You apply this up against the cervix and basically raises the temperature to 100 degrees centigrade, destroys the early cancer. So it's very effective. It's better than cryotherapy because it's less destructive, much easier to apply, and doesn't require a lot of equipment. Well, let's talk about Guatemala. Guatemala has a very large number of women that are dying every year from cervical cancer. It's the most frequent cancer of women in Guatemala. And basically, it really needs to be targeted in this country. And so that's what our project has been here through District 5170 in Area 3. Remember, I mentioned vaccine is key as well. Well, Guatemala has the vaccines. They're slowly introducing it. There's a problem with the cost of the vaccines. By the way, India just came out with a vaccine for $2.50, which is extraordinary. In the United States, it'd be about $150. So we also need a secondary treatment. And this is what we do. In 3 years, we screened 1,000 patients. It took us 3 years to do this. It was really a lot of work. We had to go to multiple areas to screen the patients. In the process, we included some good donated sources and funds to develop an infectious disease clinic. But we also introduced, or I'm going to tell you more about AMPFIRE. So AMPFIRE, this is a big change in screening. AMPFIRE is a HPV DNA technology for self-screening. It looks, you can see on this slide what it looks like. That machine on the third illustration over is the machine. And by the way, we have Dr. Yuzhang Wang here with us during this. Hopefully he'll be able to tell us a little bit more about this. But in a nutshell, this is a device that can screen for 15 different strains of the HPV virus. And it's better than VIA. VIA, remember I mentioned this screening technique using the acetic acid. There's problems with the VIA. It's not as sensitive. It's not as good as the genetic testing. And so we have to move on to this new technology if we want to screen a lot of patients. And the advantages, again, are it's more accurate, it's less expensive, can screen as many as 800 patients in a day, and it reduces the need, and this is critical, 80% of the patients are going to be negative, so they don't have to come to the hospital. Imagine how much woman power, manpower this saves when you don't have to examine 80% of the patients. So this is what it looks like when we do the test. We send a healthcare worker out to the villages. They offer to the woman in the privacy of your own bathroom, she can do a swab. This goes into a test tube. It gets brought to the hospital. It goes to the AMPFIRE machine, and we can do the screening. And if it's negative, then she's good for 3 years. Doesn't have to do any more testing. Much cheaper than Pap smear, more accurate than Pap smear. And it's easily transported. The beauty of this machine right now is it's been shrunk down to a size where you can literally put it in your backpack. So we always have troubles transporting equipment into lower income countries, but this one will not be hard to transport. So we got a IRB approved study that we did in Guatemala. We worked with the healthcare workers, and we set up to screen 1,000 patients in 6 months. You may recall it took us 3 years to screen 1,000 patients in the old-fashioned VIA technique, but with AMPFIRE, we were able basically to do 1,068 patients in 6 months. We brought our pink team down. We did screen and treat, so we screened all the patients that were positive. And in summary, this is a cost and diagnose of effective system to do genetic screening introduced in Northern California that reduced the time of screening by 8-fold. We found similar results to other screening technologies. And I think the most beautiful part of our study was now the Guatemalan team does it on their own. We don't need to go and support them. They've picked it up, they handle it, they do it on their own. So where do we go next? And I just want to share with you, we may target Belize. It's a much smaller country, population of about 400,000. I estimate we could do the entire country in probably 5 to 10 years. So if you're looking for a good project to be part of, think about this one. I'll be going to Bolivia probably in the next month or two. We've got 5 Rotary clubs that are going to do a global grant to support our work in Bolivia. So basically, I think we have an opportunity to really extend out. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, think about doing cervical cancer like we did polio. We could take on this disease and make a huge, huge difference. If you have any questions, and I want to leave time for that, please feel free to email me. Rushton can always contact me. And it's really been an opportunity and pleasure to present to you today.
Rich, fantastic material. Thank you so much. Go ahead and stop sharing. I'll introduce the people that we've got on the recording today, and then we will jump right into the questions. So from our club, my name is Rushton. I am the programs chair. Our president near Pisa in Italy, Angelica Murata. Dr. Murata, always good to have you, of course. From our club, whom you met earlier, Phil Dean. Phil, good to have you with us also. And we have two guests. Rotarian Aggie. Aggie is a friend and a longtime advocate for people to be able to take care of their health issues in better ways. We'll be hearing from her in the near future in one more of our healthcare related programs. And we have Dr. Yoxiang Wang, who has worked with Richard on elements of this project. So what I'd like to do to start with is to, let me do this real quick. And here we go. What I'd like to do is to say, Rich, it would seem that one of the critical elements of this project come down to this huge advance in screening, right? And that's made possible through I believe you called it the AMP-FIRE system, right? Do I understand right that Dr. Wang's company, Attila Biosystems, is the company that put this in motion? And if so, would you guys talk about that together?
I would love to allow Dr. Yoxiang Wang to mention how he came up with this idea and how he put it together, but I will just add on that this is a quantum leap. There are other companies that produce similar type equipment. What's unique about AMP-FIRE, from my standpoint, is that it is affordable, it's cost effective, that it is shown good results in multiple countries, but I should let him speak to that.
Well, Richard, thank you so much. And I think Richard did a wonderful job, and I highly respect his effort. And he's the one who pulled me into your club, and he told me all of the great story and great work you guys have done. And that's the reason I'm actually, planning to join your club. And so Rich has been educating me a lot, and since he was he's a doctor and talk about the HPV and the prevention. And I think the key advantages let's see this. Rich talk about the WHO mission want to screen 70% of women in the world. So keep that number. If you talk about 70% of women in the world, you want to screen it. And the key is you need to have a very good screening technology. So how do we talk about the screening technology? And first, the woman has to be able to self-sampling, because you have no way has all of the women flush into the hospital, has a doctor sampling for the woman to do the test, because that itself is very expensive. And the second is a high throughput. You don't want to do 20 years, 30 years to screening 70% of women in the world, because the woman already developed, the cervical cancer. So that means the test has to be throughput. Like in a short time period, every country is like in 1 or 2 or 5 years, you can screen in all of them. So the technology has to be throughput. And the second is, as Rich has pointed out, the major is in the low middle income countries. And when you talk about low middle income countries, and the first thing you talk about affordable. And so the technology has to be affordable. And the second is most time they don't have a highly skillful person like what we do in the US. So that means the technology has to be extremely simple and adaptable to the local area, and everybody can do it. For that. Ideally, in the ideal world is just like a rapid test, you do it at home, and everybody can do it at home, for that. And that's what, what's the amplifier and has really aiming to and to support for the elimination of the cervical cancer as a global mission, as a WHO mission. And the first, and our equipment is portable. And the second is the equipment is affordable. as Rich already pointed out, our next generation of the equipment, and you can put it in your backpack. You can take that to anywhere, because most time when we mention about low middle income countries, they're in a remote site. It's harder for you to transport the equipment to that site. So our equipment is portable. You can take that to anywhere, and it can be battery charged. And the second, Rich already pointed out, and you have to treat it with a thermal coagulation. And our test is extremely fast. So the result is about within an hour, and you can treat the woman right there and right in the clinic, for that. So all of the features together, and that's why make the amplified test is so attractive globally. And we actually supported by US government. We get a grant from a National Cancer Institute, and they are working with us. And I think a few weeks ago, President Joe Biden and in the White House, and get all of the cervical cancer expert in the field together, made an announcement. And in the future, it will be, the HPV testing to replace the Pap smear. Like in the US, it's already made announcement, not the Pap smear test. It's actually the HPV testing as a primary testing methods and for that. So the goal is NCI is want to have our test to be adopted for the WHO and supporting for the nationwide and not the globally, cervical cancer elimination effort. So that's what I want to add on. I'm going to stop here, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Wow, great. Well, it's wonderful to have both of you here because this project is such a bold one, right? And Rich, what I'd like you to do is maybe talk a little bit about how the polio effort essentially created the template for us to be able to think in terms of taking on this big an issue. Like are there, you mentioned this in your presentation, but are there particular things that were learned as a function of the efforts to get people out in the field and deliver the polio vaccine that allow us to think about taking on cervical cancer in this way?
Great question. Think back 30 years when somebody did the first oral polio vaccine in the Philippines, and then decided, well, maybe we can do the whole country. And actually, I think that was a president from Italy, if I'm not incorrect, that started that project in the Philippines. And from there, they said, wow, this is impressive. Let's take it to WHO. And WHO thought, well, gosh, this is a little bit big for an organization like Rotary. You can't really take on the whole planet, can you? And of course, the answer to that we know today is, yeah, we can. And we did. And so we essentially have almost eliminated a virus that paralyzed so many people. So it's the same with cervical cancer. We're still in, I won't say the early stages, we're still in the beginning stages, in the sense that, we've only screened a small minority of women in lower income countries. And when, as Dr. Wang has pointed out, there are literally billions of women that need to be screened, and the children need to be vaccinated. At some point, after we vaccinated all the young girls and boys, I should add, then we won't have to worry so much about screening. But again, 350,000 women dying of cervical cancer is a terrible number, and it's not necessary. Australia said that we'll eliminate this disease by 2028. I don't think they'll do it that soon, but the power of Rotary is to make a big difference. And so that's what I would answer to your question, Rushton, is that we want, and which we're doing already. There are many Rotary clubs that are working on this. The HURAG, which is Health Education and Welfare Rotary Action Group, has identified cervical cancer as their primary target to work on health. So I think we're making progress. I think it's going to happen.
Well, fantastic. It seems that you look at what happened with polio, and you look at the incredibly necessary rapid advancement of vaccines related to COVID, and we now have awareness of what's possible in terms of addressing a disease worldwide, which is very, very exciting. I have a question that came in. It's a bit of a technical question medically. You compared the EMFIRE screening to Pap smears. So the Amplifier is cheaper, it's more accurate. Does a Pap smear address more than just cervical cancer? Are we really comparing apples and apples with those two things?
Well, not really, and I'll let Yuzhang answer to that as well. But basically, the Amplifier tests for many more things. Pap smear is primarily just to identify the beginnings of precancer or cancer in testing. And that's not to say that we won't do Pap smear anymore. Most of these countries, especially in South America and Central America, still use Pap smear, but it's antiquated. For the reasons that the new technology, this HPV DNA testing, tests for a number of things, and maybe Yuzhang can tell us how many more things you can test. By the way, it tests for COVID as well, but he can tell us what it can test for.
Okay, the things what I can add on, Rustin. First of all, the Pap smear, the accuracy is about 70%. But the HPV testing, the genetic testing, the accuracy is about 95%. So with a Pap smear, that's why you have to do it every year. And with a molecular test, as Richard has pointed out, 3 years, you don't need to do anything. So that you can save the cost and save the manpower on that, and also improve the accuracy. And the second is, I think Richard already pointed out, first of all, the cervical cancer is preventable. You can totally eliminate cervical cancer. That's why WHO has a mission like a 90-70-90. It's a preventable. And the second is, as a Rotary, as a club, and as Richard pointed out, whether we can do it. If we can do it, that's why everything depends on the technology. So if the technology is affordable and a high throughput, and with the powerful of your organization, and I believe, and that actually is achievable.
Fantastic. So as we begin to wind down, I don't want to finish this recording without addressing another topic that Aggie reminded me of in our chat. Rich, you are engaged in all sorts of really interesting health projects and all, but you are also an author, and I believe that you have had a book about Watergate spies, a novel that has come out recently. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is there, in your mind, a relationship between what you do as a doctor and what you do as a novelist?
Oh, gosh. Well, I actually have two books, and there's a nonfiction book, which is on my website, www.rgodfreybooks.com. And it's about our work in Kenya and East Africa, and is a book about basically what the women in Kenya have done to make changes in their country. And by the way, they've made huge progress in eliminating cervical cancer right now in Eastern Kenya. Extraordinary work. So this is happening all over the world. The Watergate book is a recent novel. It's a fun book. It's actually not under my name. It's got a pseudonym of Delta Tango because it's a double agent working for Castro that tells the story. But most of you are too young. If you remember Watergate, there were some really interesting people back in those days. G. Gordon Liddy, Howard Hughes, Timothy Leary, Richard Nixon, and all his folks. So it's basically a historical novel of that period. But thank you for asking that question. I appreciate it.
Well, I think that the question's important in that when we think about the work we do as Rotarians, there are these very big projects. There are local projects that are very focused. Whether it's the kind of thing that happens to make sure that a playground is safe. And then you look at the health projects and the global health projects. All of this stuff requires imagination, right? As Rotarians, we need to be people who are excited about the possibilities of taking on something challenging. And so I love that there is also that element of your personality that's like, I can take on writing a book. Why not do a historical novel? Very, very cool stuff. We are kind of running out of time, so I will wind things down. Rich, as we always do, I will hand it back to you for the final word in just a moment. But for all of you who are watching this recording, thank you for joining us. The Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley is an online and asynchronous Rotary Club. It is our goal that people who have a heart for service but might be crazy busy and need something a little different, might think in terms of like, maybe that's a seat at the Rotary table that I could occupy. And the answer is absolutely. You can find us at SiliconValleyRotary.com or at Rotary.cool. Really. So we hope that you will give our club a look. Let us know that you are here. There is a place a little farther down our meeting page, not the YouTube page, but the meeting page, where you can register your attendance, visiting Rotarians who are working to make up a miss in their own club. By doing that, you'll receive an email that you can pass along to your club secretary. All good there. And then at the bottom of the page is the Discuss section, DISQUS. It is a forum and an opportunity for you to tell us a little bit about what you saw in this presentation or in other elements of our meeting. It is a chance to share ideas with our members. It's a chance to respond to things that other people have said. As always, of course, keep those, keep your comments aligned to the 4-way test. And we are excited to hear from you. So we hope you will do that. Rich, as I mentioned before, we always hand it back to our speaker for the final word. And so I hand it back to you. What would you like people to have in mind as they finish up this video?
Well, thank you, Rushton, and thank you for the opportunity to present. And congratulations to Philip for his Paul Harris Award. That's a great thing that you've done. And we can all do something. So what my last word would be this, that if you're interested in moving forward with eliminating a scourge of a cancer from this planet, then think about working with our clubs, with the global grants, or perhaps think about starting a project yourselves. And you can reach me, or you can reach me through Rushton if you have any questions or desire to pursue this. Thanks again, Rushton.
Thank you, Rich. And for everyone, we will see you next week.